Okay, welcome back to Coffee with Tony 2026. This is my fourth episode, and in this one we're going to talk about, let's see if I can get that squared away there. It looks a little better, I guess. I'm going to talk about how cancer changed my life, and the reason I want to talk about this is because I'm going to use this as a lead into my next two episodes, which are going to deal with emotional intelligence. Next week, I'm going to talk about different emotions, what their purpose is. And I think as adults, we know this, but we just don't think about it. But emotions have purpose. You know, there's things that you should do or have to do. They're meant to deal with things. So talk about that and the different energy levels that come along with those emotions, and also the week after that I'll talk about how to deal with emotions. And those are, I think the next 2 weeks will be great for kids. If you have kids and they're, you're trying to explain emotions to them, maybe you don't have the words, that would be a good thing. You could sit down with the kids and watch the video with them and answer questions, and also learn how to deal with emotions the following week. I used to do that as a lesson with my kids when I was a school counselor, and I absolutely loved that. Excuse me, I'm going to try and get this centered better. And I actually loved the lesson where I talked about the purpose of emotions, because I don't think I ever really thought about that till I was in college and I learned about it, and I was like, no kidding, huh? Like, this makes sense. And so I always enjoyed sharing that with the kids, because I thought nobody taught us this when we were going, in school. And so I think, I enjoyed teaching it. I was something I was passionate about, and I hope they enjoyed it. I think most of them actually did enjoy it. And so if you got kids, tune in. You might learn something. You might learn how to talk to your kids about that, about emotions, and, hopefully that'll help you. But anyway, back to this week. So I'm talking about how cancer changed my life, and I'm using this as a lead-in because there's obviously an emotional side to this. When you get told you have, only a certain amount of time to live, you got this major diagnosis, and it has a huge impact. And so there is an emotional side to this. And so the three parts I'm going to talk about today as far as how cancer changed my life. The first one, the way cancer changed my life, two major aspects: the diagnosis itself and what, the impact that had, and then also the change when I had to step away from work, the change in my life roles, and how that impacted me. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about some things that you could do, because I know we all go through life changes. People retire, people get diagnoses, every day. And so maybe you're changing your life, there's a change coming for you, or you're in the middle of a change and you need some ideas to how to deal with it. Stay tuned to the end. I'll tell you how, I'll give you some pointers on how things that I've done that have helped me over time. And so, but first let's start with talking about the diagnosis. So obviously when you get that diagnosis from the doctor, it's, there's an impact. It's depressing. And, while I never felt that would be the end of me, there's still a sense of heaviness and depression that goes along with that. And then the anxiety as well. I you always wonder, is the treatment going to work, But for me also, I felt a sense of, and I think a lot of men go through this, we feel this need to protect people. And so, as I had this anxiety because I knew people would react to it when I told them. So I would tell them, and then I would be like, "It's going to be okay." I felt the need to console them because it was weird, And I think there's a lot of people that are probably amazed I'm still around that, thought I was full of whatever when I said, "Don't worry, it's going to be all right. I'm going to beat this." Um, But anyway, so there's the depression, depressive side, that's an impact, you know, and then the anxiety of telling, your family and everything, and then feeling the need to console everybody because, it's weird because I guess for me it wasn't just a matter of being a man and that's natural because you want to protect people, but I think I really was the only one that believed I was going to beat it. So what I did tell people, like I was coming from a genuine place and where they were just overwhelmed with it. And then, I've also had the time to deal with it. By the time I got the diagnosis, we had been through so many tests to confirm results, and I had my breakdown or whatever you want to call it. I where it hit me, and I sat in a parking lot, and I was just overwhelmed. But then with the diagnosis, you also have all this, the anxiety about like different treatments. You're hopeful because you want to do certain things. I was hopeful because, as I told you in the previous video, we talked about different treatments for cancer. It's basically there's surgery, there's chemo, radiation, and then immunotherapies. And so obviously you're hoping, let me do the surgery and get on with my life. But you have to go through all these appointments and consultations and, my course of action was kind of laid out for me in a way because I wasn't eligible for the surgery. And then I really didn't want to do the radiation for several reasons. Not that chemo's a lot of fun either, but chemo, they had the cancer center right here. I could get my treatment, and that was easy for me because another part of this was my support system isn't always dependable. So it was a no-brainer because I was like, well, I can at least get an Uber. It's right, it's a couple miles away. I can do it right here, get an Uber. And I didn't have to depend on people that I wasn't sure I could depend on. So, it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with, And then, where are we at here? 8 minutes? Okay. Doing good on time. And so, then you start doing the treatment and sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here. And eventually I had to take off the time from work because you only get a certain amount of time off, and doing chemo 3 days every other week, you're going to run out of time real fast. And plus, by the time I even got my diagnosis and started treatment, I was already pretty much out of time because I did all these other appointments for CT scans, PET scans, MRIs. I don't know why they need to do all that. My doctor, I felt when I was in the office with my doctor in August, we were talking about my blood work, and that's where all this flagged. we talked about my ALK phosphatase and how it was way off the charts. And then I was telling him about other symptoms, and he's like, okay, well, our conversation is going to shift now from, we're not talking about blood work anymore. We're going to talk about, we're probably going to need to get you tested for colon cancer to rule it out based on your symptoms. Excuse me. And so he told me to hop up on the table, and he kind of felt around my stomach, and he said, I can feel that you have 6 masses, at least 6 masses. There's 7. He said several, but I think he said at least 6. And then I told him to be careful, in the area down there where my sigmoid colon was. He felt around, and obviously that's where the biggest one was. So he's like, well, there is masses, we have to find out. So, and I kind of felt from there, like I know tumors aren't always cancerous, I get it. But when, you're talking about it's spreading, it spread somewhere, whether it was from the liver and spread to the colon or vice versa, we knew it spread. And so anyway, it's, I didn't understand why we had to go through ultrasound and then CT scan, MRI, and then PET scan. But anyway, we had to do all that. And so that took up a lot of time anyway, just to get back to the work thing. And so obviously I had to take the time off of work, and that was a shift for me. And it was hard too. That was part of the depression too, because, I enjoyed my job. I enjoyed the relationships that I built with the people there. I enjoyed the working with the kids. I felt like I was doing good. That's always a plus, And I felt like I had the confidence of my leadership, my administrators, my the principal and vice principal. And so I felt good there. I felt like it was a really good, I was doing really good, and I enjoyed it. And so having to pull away from that was hard too. And so that was a shift for me. And that leads me into this next part here, where I'm going to talk about how my life roles changed. My work and life roles changed because of this. So obviously, I had to take the time off of work, right? So you only get so much time off. I was pretty much out of time. And so I had to take the time off, and then but also from a parenting role, I'm still a father, but my kids are older. My daughter is 20, actually she's 22 now, but at that time she was 21. And she had already moved out, and my son, was 17. Excuse me. And so, they didn't need me as much as they used to, And so that, I had already been dealing with that a little bit. And then now this change was coming, because now I'm not going to be working, and that's part of who I am, And so I took the time to, do the treatments. Obviously I had to get in there and do the treatments, and I tried to put my focus on the fight, because I knew it was going to be a fight, whether I did radiation, whatever I did. And so I did the chemo. Excuse me. Oh man, good thing I'm having coffee. But anyway, I started doing chemo, and then it's only every other week, so you have a whole week off in between. There's a lot of downtime. And granted, it's good because even though I'm not doing the chemo, what I found out, the longer you're doing the chemo, the longer the cycle is. Like the side effects are worse. You might be able to see here, I have these little red blotches, and this is close to a week after doing chemo, and I'm getting this rash now. So there's different. It's like a cycle, basically. So it would have been hard to work anyway. But there is the time there. If you're feeling up to it, you can do different things. For me, I made it about the fight because I was like, well, that is my purpose right now. I don't have a job. My job is I got to beat this and get back to work. And, and so that's what I did. And I did a lot of research. If you look at my other video, How I'm Beating Cancer, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different supplements, herbal supplements that I talk about. A lot of time went into researching those things and finding out the information and how to, what to include. Oh, excuse me. And so I kind of filled my time with that a little bit, between doing the treatments and then doing the research to kind of figure out what I wanted to do at home to add to, to help beat this quicker. So that filled a little bit of a void for me there. And it filled time. It gave me something productive to do. I think when I got in trouble, or when, I shouldn't say got in trouble, but I mean when it got to me, like it got depressing, is when I had already done all this research and I felt like there was not much more I could add. I mean, I'm doing a ton of different things, taking a ton of different supplements and herbal medicines, whatever you want to call it. And like I question at times how well my body even absorbs all this, because there's a lot of playing around with it because, and the reason I question is because a lot of times I get diarrhea and stuff like that, and I'm like, well, if it's all just going through me, like how much am I absorbing? How much good is this doing? So you got to kind of figure things, and goes back to why we need research, But I'm not going to go because that was last week's episode. But yeah, so when I was done filling my time with that, it was hard for me because now I really didn't have a purpose, because I was out of work. I engaged in this fight by doing all this research and figuring out what I could do to add, to add, to what I was doing to the chemo and, kind of speed things up. And I was pretty much doing everything I could do. And that's when it got to me. Like, that's when it was hard for me, because that was when I really felt like I have no purpose, and I'm just waiting. You go through the motions and you wait for the next CT scan. You go into it with the highest hopes, and and I thank God that I've had good results along the way. But obviously, to some extent there is a letdown when you're hoping and praying, you're believing in faith that God's going to heal you and this is going to be gone, and then you get the results and it's still there. Better. It's definitely thank God. It has always gotten better. I can say I haven't had a CT scan throughout this treatment where it has not gotten better. So that, I'm not complaining, but at the same time, it is still there. So there's that, it's a lot, but you go through these motions. You don't really feel like you have a purpose anymore, or I didn't feel like I had a purpose anymore. And so I kind of developed a routine, and that helped too. But that was also during the time that I was doing my research. I would get up, I would have my coffee. I kept the coffee because, um, I probably, there's some people that would say, well, it's acidic, and you don't want to create an acidic environment in your body. And um, I did scale back a lot because I used to drink coffee pretty much all day up until like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Um, so I do 2 cups in the morning. And, excuse me, could use some coffee right now. But I kept that part of my routine. I'd get up, I'd have 2 cups of coffee, have some music on, maybe do a little praying in the morning. And then I would come out here, or actually out in the other room, and I would get in my sauna blanket and sweat for a half hour to an hour, whatever I could stand. And then I would go and I would crawl out of that and go get a shower, get some water in me. And then after I get showered and I drink enough water and I'm kind of like settled, then I would do what I call my chemo shake, and this is where I tried to put a bunch of this stuff in and make it big. I put it in with a protein shake, and I'd mix it up in the blender, and I would do that. And then I would just kind of chill out for a little bit, by then my son would be coming home in about an hour, hour and a half, whatever. He would come home, and then we, talk about how his day was or whatever, and then he would go play video games, and I would go turn the TV on. But I had somewhat of a schedule, and not always with the TV. I like to go for walks too, so usually later in the afternoon I would try that when the weather was good enough to do that. And so the routine helped, but it changed. But it was still, it's one of those things where you have to adapt to the change in your situation, And so that was how I adapted, was, engaging in the research to fight this, developing a routine. And so now I'm going to shift into, before I do that, I do want to say, I learned a little bit about this in my career counseling class when I was getting my master's degree in counseling. Donald Super was one of the original career counselors, and he talked about life roles. And in particularly, he dealt with a lot of clients that had trouble in retirement, because they weren't used to all this leisure time. And so this was something he was very familiar with. And so this is similar to my situation, like having that downtime. I had to find ways to fill those voids. And so maybe you're in a situation where you have some voids because maybe you recently retired, or maybe you're worried about retiring because you might have to go through this. Or maybe your kids have gone off to college or gotten married and you're an empty nester, and that's a change in your life role. Excuse me. Oh man, I am so sorry. I am yawning a lot. But anyway, so he dealt with a lot of this, and so this next part I'm going to tell you a little bit about how you could deal with it, some things you could do to make the transition easier for yourself, some things that I've done that have helped me. Nothing's perfect. You're going to have to find what works for you, and but these are some tips, these are some things that I did that has helped me. So with the leisure time, there's a lot of gaps, right? You're normally working 8 hours, you're you have family responsibilities, and now you're at a point where you don't have all this stuff. So, I would say, I've had some friends that had aspirations of writing books and doing certain things like that. When you retire, if there's something that you've wanted to do, that's your time to do it. You know, um, maybe you want to write a book, maybe you don't want to write a book, maybe you want to do some kind of advocacy work. I just my last video was on why we need to advocate for research. I've written letters, and so that was something that was big to me as I started finding out that, that those clinical trials should be happening. So I wrote some of those people that I talked about. And also for me, well, for you, if you have anything that you've been wanting to do it. It could be a project at the house. It could be writing a book. It could be whatever you want to do. You just want to, visit with your friends more often because you have the time to do it. Do it. Don't use the time, I guess is what I'm saying. If there's something you wanted to do, that's your time to do it. Give it a try, even if you don't succeed. Like for me, I talked about doing a YouTube station or channel for a while, and for me, success is doing it. It gives me something to do. I'm not gonna be, famous, YouTube famous or whatever you want to call it. I don't care about it. I'm not gonna get no sponsors or anything like that. I definitely don't see anything like that happening. But for me, it's a success doing it because it gives me something productive to do. And I've always wanted to try it, so here I am. So maybe you got something that you've wanted to do. I would say too, routines. As I just talked about a few minutes ago in the previous section, routines helped me. It helped me fill the gaps in time. It helped me stay focused on what I wanted to do, and so it helped me. I am so sorry, but it helped me with the transition. For that. So maybe developing a routine for yourself that you like, or maybe holding on to part of a routine. I'm not, I don't think I'm not naive enough to think that I'm the only one that likes to have a cups of coffee in the morning. And so I held on to that part of my routine from when I was working, and so routine is good. You can also volunteer if there's something you want to get involved with. When you're at retirement age, a lot of us, we sometimes have grandkids, and so maybe if you've ever wanted to get involved with like say your kids or your grandkids are involved with sports, and maybe they need a coach. You could volunteer to coach. Or helping out your kids, taking the grandkids to soccer practice or whatever, getting involved that way. Maybe you don't have to take on an official role, but maybe you can be the person that takes the kids to soccer practice or to the games, And so that's something you could do, volunteer work. And the thing with volunteer work, I know a lot of people, I won't even say a lot of people, I know for myself, a big part of what I'm missing is not just the role in being productive, I miss the social interaction as well. I had good relationships, and so volunteering is a good good opportunity to get social interactions with other adults, and so that can help you fill that void if that's something that you're dealing with. I'm sorry, I'm just looking through my notes here. Hobbies, developing new hobbies. Go kayaking, get a bike, go biking on a nice day if you want to. Build models, take piano lessons, whatever it is. You have the time to do it now, so do it. And so take on new hobbies if you want. But the biggest thing here is, now I talked about ways that can help you fill voids and things like that. I think it's healthy to fill voids if you're having a hard time transitioning. But some advice I want to leave you with as I get ready to close this out is embrace the leisure time. You've worked too hard for your retirement and you've earned the time off. And so don't always try to fill gaps. Do what you want to do, but embrace that leisure time. Don't just try to fill space. Do what you have to do. If it gets a little depressing and it's hard for you, you need to fill some gaps, develop some relationships. But at the end of the day, try to embrace the leisure time. And that's all you can do, really. All right, I think I am done. I am sorry for yawning all this whole time. I apologize. But anyway, as I said earlier, I want to use this as a lead-in because there's a lot of emotional side to this, so it's a perfect lead-in to emotional intelligence the next 2 weeks. So tune in next week. Coffee with Tony 2026. And we'll see you next week. And we'll talk about the purpose of different emotions. See you then.